What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and this is going to be my 9.15 Destruction Warlock PTR feedback video, wish list. I guess that's sort of what you can call it. A couple days ago, I put out the Affliction one talking about Aft's lack of single target, so the seeds, Grimoire of Sacrifice, a few things here and there. And while there might be some carryover from that, I don't think there's as much to talk about, I guess, wish list wise, feedback wise for Destruction as there is Affliction. Now, I'm going to be releasing Destro tonight, obviously, and hopefully tomorrow Demonology. With that being said, though, tomorrow is Wednesday, and PTR could very well be going up for 9.15 then. And I'm not sure if the first build's going to bring any changes with it, but if it is, well, then, you know, I'm probably going to have to remake the Demonology video, and, well, we'll figure all that out. But with that being said, there are a few things conduit-wise, talent-wise, sort of toolkit-wise that I want to touch on briefly as far as Destro is concerned. Now, if you see any weak auras, profiles, or add-ons in this video you'd like to acquire, you can get them all for free off my Twitch. Want to swing by, hang out, they all are indeed available to you guys for free. Also want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you a million times for all support, guys. I really, truly do appreciate it. If you're interested in potentially supporting on Patreon, there should be a link somewhere up here, or I believe actually in the channel, or I guess the video description. That being said, let's get into it, starting off with, I guess, a brief summary or overview of what Destruction has looked like in Sanctum of Domination. Now, going in, for the most part, we assume this is probably going to be a pretty big Destro in Demo tier, and for the most part, it has been. Now, we've seen some Aft parses popping up on bosses due to Decaying Soul Satchel, haste stacking, the effect that DSS gives. Well, that's relevant, and that's cool. For the most part, there were, I think the majority of Warlock players would say that Destro is probably going to be the better spec out of all three this tier, but that sort of hasn't ended up really being the case, I think, for a few reasons. Now, the Terror Grew, gimmicky fight, whatever traits you get, greatly increased, add value, devalue things. We're even playing CDF here for whatever reason. This is Mythic, right? Yeah, we're playing CDF here for whatever reason, but, you know, it's a gimmicky fight. And for what it's worth, I think the Terror Grew is a great example of, it's one of the better first bosses they've designed. If it's going to be a gimmicky fight, make it one of the first ones. The Terror Grew is actually a really good boss. Just these parses, for the most part, they're not really accurate or as relevant as they, you know, might actually be in a more realistic setting. Regardless, I have the Jailer. Now, we've seen an Aft park pop up lately playing DSS with 5 PIs. There's one here, a Demo parks, but for the most part, we assume this is going to be a big Destro fight, and it pretty much ended up being, well, that. Now, there are varying kill times, 6.5 minutes all the way down to 4 minutes, 4.5, give or take. Some guilds lust intermission, some guilds pop CDs in phase 1, phase 2, some guilds cleave, some don't. But regardless, whatever you're doing, with the angel spawning in phase 1, the boss being there, and the cleave adds in phase 2, this has pretty much been the nail on the head. We hit the nail on the head. This has been a Destro fight for the most part. The 9 was the first fight we thought Destro was. It's the first fight we sort of missed the mark on. We thought it would be a good Destro fight, but not a bad Demo fight. And while there are a few Destro parses mixed in here, this is more or less ended up being a Demo fight due to phase 2. Basically being single target, but this was sort of known, I guess, during PTR testing that Demo and Destro both had a bit of value here. Things get interesting when it comes to Remnant of Ner'zhul. Now, in progression, early progression, race to world first, guilds getting here early on, week 1, week 2, Remnant was a Destro fight. Now, Aft was there, but the toolkit, the progression toolkit you needed, Destro brought the most to it. Big cleave, orb damage, orbs need to die, big burst damage. So you burn the boss, you burn the final set of orbs, and you go from there. But they nerfed the health of the orbs substantially. The mythic orbs have less health than the heroic orbs at this point, so you can barely get any havoc cleave in, can't even get a full havoc window in. You've seen a shift to demonology on this fight, mainly because, well, similar to other bosses we'll see in a minute here, you just kill the boss. You ignore the orbs as a Destro or Demo lock for the most part. You can implode around them, try and get some value, but you really just, well, you burn the boss because there's not really a point in doing anything else. The orbs just die easily. So this has shifted from being a pretty good Destro fight to, I'd say, an okay fight, but I think Demonology and potentially Aft, depending what build you're playing, actually has the edge here on Remnant. To a similar extent, Soul Render was a weird fight during testing. I felt all 3 lock specs weren't really relevant on the fight. They were all okay. Destro brought mediocre cleave to like a good cleave to boss and overseer, mediocre on ads without infernal. Demo felt awkward too, but okay if you're doing that big single target boss damage profile. But we didn't really test with Sow the Seeds on Soul Render. Aft has taken over here, so I don't want to call it a Destro boss to a Demo to an Aft boss, but Destro far less relevant here than it was in the early weeks of Prog. Now, to another, well, I guess in another case similar to Remnant, Painsmith has also been nerfed. They nerfed the ads, they nerfed the boss, and they nerfed the spike ball health. So this is a very big Destro progression boss because you need to cleave on the orbs, you need to you need big damage on the ads coming out of phase 2 back into phase 1, which is why you held damage and why you pre-infernaled. With everything being nerfed now, you mostly just play Demo. There are some Destro parsers here playing Wilfred, some playing Corain for first strike abilities, whether it's like cleaving on orbs, getting crit value, or burning ads. You basically just play Wilfreds and big cleave ads as Destro, or you just play Demo and kill the boss and ignore the ads and the spike balls, which is what most have chosen to do after the actual nerfs. So another boss has gone from being a Destro boss to, well, Demo boss. Guardian, we know people play Demo on it. This is the big single target boss that's here. Everybody plays Demo. Fate Scribe, also a boss we assumed Destro would be the play on, but Demo, you see some AF DSS cleave here, which is, you know, a thing on the ads. Demo just ended up being the better choice, I feel, for this fight, depending on what your guild needs, but tank ads didn't need as much cleave, the smaller ads died fast, and you just lust and kill the boss coming out of second set of runes, which is what Demo is better at. You just killed the boss. And Kel'Thuzad, this boss is a meme, but we thought it would be an AF or Destro boss. It's a mix of both. The boss is a meme, but, you know, Destro is still sort of there with Corain and, you know, Shadowburn and all that. Sylvanas, pure Demo. So a lot of fights this tier were predicted to be Destro fights, and they were for Prog, but it shifted towards Demo or towards AF based on tuning and things like that. Now, the tier has been a pretty big miss overall. I think Sanctum Domination will go down as probably being one of, if not the most undertuned tiers in modern day WoW, and that's excluding Emerald Nightmare because that was a weird gimmicky 2-day raid. Sanctum, unfortunately, the bosses were good, but most of the tuning just missed the mark. These three bosses, being Guardian, Fate Scribe, and KT, just fell over during the Race to World First, and like they're honestly all, well, sub 10 pull boss, sub 30 pull boss, and Fate Scribe can be anywhere depending on your guild, but Destro sort of fell off. It's not bad, but it's not as strong as we thought it would be coming out of PTR testing and coming out of, well, I don't know, week 1 and 2 of progression. With that being said, I want to talk a bit about a few conduits for Destro that could probably use a bit of attention, and then some talents that we know could use a bit of attention. So when it comes to Destro conduits, unlike Demonology that just has 4 insane conduits, Born of Blood, Carnivorous, Fel Commando, Tyrant Soul, they're all just good at what they do. And technically you could even play Soul Eater, even though you just don't want to, because Demo conduits are just insane. But Affliction and Destruction ones aren't really in the same building, room, universe. They're just not as good, not as relevant. Now, we touched on the AF ones already in the previous video, and we'll go more in depth on Demo ones in the next video, but the Destro ones. Now, as far as Ashen Remains is concerned, this thing's fine. It's your set it and forget it, your passive conduit. You put it in, you empower it, it does what it does. It increases Chaos Bolt damage and Incinerate damage, and the vast majority of the time, you'll have your Immolate on that target, unless it's dying fast or in a Havoc window. You'll typically have Immolate on your target, so it's basically a Chaos Bolt or Incinerate damage increase. It's fine. Works with Roaring Blaze for Incinerate. It's fine. It's good to go. Duplicitous Havoc to a similar extent. Havoc deals 18% more damage to your Havoc target. Keep in mind, the Havoc damage reduction is indeed 60%, but if you actually slot in Duplicitous, which I have here, it'll change the tooltip to 78%. So not the exact same replication, but the higher we go, you know, you're getting there. The two big issues I feel lie in Combusting Engine and Infernal Brand. Now, Combusting Engine says Conflagrate increases your Conflagrate, however you want to word it, increases your remaining Immolate damage by 13.6% until Immolate expires or is refreshed. Now, Combusting Engine has been really hit or miss. It's been basically a miss for me. You see it played in certain spots, but I just think it's sort of counterintuitive in a sense. You have your Pandemic window for your Immolate, which you can refresh it in because, number one, I mean, well, you know, that's how dots work nowadays, and it makes fights a lot easier, quality of life increase there. But you're sort of punished for doing that with Combusting Engine. Number two, you have Roaring Blaze, the talent, which, yes, if you're playing Cinders, you have 3 stacks of Conflagrate, and the cooldown time is reduced a good bit. I think my actual cast time or CD time on Conflagrate is, let's see, it's 7.9 seconds, so basically 8. Roaring Blaze lasts 8 seconds, so pretty much we can maintain roughly a 100% uptime if we space out Roaring Blaze. And typically it's somewhere around 90%, a bit higher, give or take, but typically somewhere around there is what you get when you play Cinder's Roaring Blaze. The thing is, Combusting Engine technically rewards you for stacking conflict rates earlier into the immolate until you refresh the immolate or if it falls. So it's sort of counterintuitive with Roaring Blaze. It works with Cinders, but it sort of doesn't, because like there's that weird CD reduction and like haste affecting the actual recharge time on conflict rate. It's just awkward. It's awkward to play with. Now, you can just straight up socket it in and get some value out of it. It's better than not playing a third potency conduit, but I just feel like it missed the mark. Now, I've tried to brainstorm a good bit about what changes can be made to Combusting Engine, and in the end, they can probably just leave it the way that it is and leave it in a mediocre state. But I came up with the idea of maybe having some kind of like dot effect applied to your target when you conflict rate it if immolate is applied, or maybe like if you have your immolate applied, it applies to dot regardless, but the dot damage is increased while your immolate is actually active. So it doesn't really play around like, you know, having to conflict rate early and before pandemic windows or all that kind of stuff. It seems sort of like basic and maybe a bit bland in a sense, but at the same time, that's sort of what conduits are, or a lot of them are, right? I want something that you can just sort of work and not have to like be counterintuitive with Roaring Blaze, but better with Cinders and awkward and pandemic windows. It feels like a lot of abilities, just like looking back at what's it called, Creeping Death for Affliction, just work sort of in an opposite way of how the spec is actually built. And I sort of feel Combusting Engine is just sort of that, having it apply some kind of like minor dot effect. I believe there's an older version of Roaring Blaze that used to do that too. It might have even been in BFA. Having it do that would be fine. It wouldn't be like make or break utterly insane, but it would gain value in two targets because you could havoc it. You can just tab target a few of them around depending what you're doing. It wouldn't be that bad, and I think it would make Combusting Engine a much more realistic and much more playable conduit of what it is now. As far as Infernal Brand is concerned, I've talked to THD about this conduit a lot, and we'll probably reference it a bit when we get the talents here. This thing, I feel like it's a mess. The immolation aura damage increase was so much higher when it came to alpha and beta, and they changed it a million times. They nerfed the actual value by a crazy amount, and they gave each individual Infernal, if you're playing Reign of Chaos, their own individual debuff that they apply that corresponds to Infernal Brand. It used to just be one. If you drop the Reign of Chaos Infernal, or if you drop an Infernal and proc 2 or 3 random Chaos Infernals, it would help stack the one debuff more and more and more, faster and faster. Now it's each Infernal has their own individual debuff, so you don't get like the max value as early as possible. Now there's a lot of synergy with Infernal Brand and Reign of Chaos, but unfortunately Reign of Chaos is in an awkward spot where there's a lot of RNG tied into it, and Infernal Brand doubles down on that RNG. Now, they could just quite literally just buff the immolation aura damage of Infernal Brand. It'd probably be fine. It'd probably be okay. I know it's a bit sketchy when it comes to actual like AoE packs and things like that, but you can indeed tab target the Infernal Brand debuff around too. So it sort of depends with what they actually want to do with this. I think a lot of it just lies in Reign of Chaos consistency, but THC mentioned he liked to see some kind of like infernal interaction here, a bit of an infernal CDR, meaning cooldown reduction. Now that paired with Wilfred's can get into some pretty dangerous territory, I feel, because I mean 2-minute Infernal and 3-minute Infernal for Destro feel incredibly different. The spec is, it's literally two different specs, right? I mean, Shadow Priest said that conduit does 10 things, right? Reduces the cooldown, does more damage, buffs 10 players, makes dinner at the same time. It does 10 things, right? Why can't Infernal Brand do that? But being real here, I wouldn't be surprised to see this buffed by a little bit percentage-wise. If you're playing Roaring Blaze, Infernal Brand is incredibly mediocre. It's just not good. You really don't even play it. You only play it with Reign of Chaos, typically. And Reign of Chaos is RNG, and Infernal Brand sort of doubles down on the RNG. So I don't really have a great answer how to fix Infernal Brand. Best way probably is to buff the immolation aura damage, because it does sort of scale with eradication damage modifiers not working with your Infernal. But either way, I just think it needs some attention in the first place. As far as this goes, Soul Eater is universally applicable. It's good for Destro because you only have 2 good conduits in these two, and then you just play Soul Eater because these are garbage. So I like to see them addressed in some way, shape, or form. With that being said, let's talk about some talents that I want to see addressed as well come 9.15. So I could spend an hour talking about Destro's baseline toolkit, talents like Cataclysm and toggleable abilities like Old Fire and Brimstone that should Shadowburn that should be a part of the baseline toolkit. Blizzard has said that they might change some core toolkits around, but as far as like 0.5 patches and even like just patches in an expansion are concerned, you typically don't see change like that made. I'm gonna say right now to appease everybody, Shadowburn should be baseline, so should Cataclysm, and Fire and Brimstone should be toggleable. Okay, with that being said, let's get into the talent changes just to appease everybody. And I agree, I like those ideas personally, but it's probably not going to happen regardless. So the first row here, flashover eradication, we know where they're at. They're both very similar. Eradication sims a little higher. People play flashover for a lot of reasons. Soulfire doesn't sim terribly from what I've seen either. It is havocable. I do think one of the issues with Soulfire is sort of just the long cast time on it, amongst a few other things. I think an easy change could be backdraft and conflict rate affecting Soulfire. It would make it better. It probably would add a lot of value in Havoc windows, like on Havoc based fights, because you can Havoc Soulfire. You can do it. It gives you, like, I'll put it up here, watch my shards, I'll Havoc it. It's a glacially slow cast time, but it gives you 2 shards. It'll apply Immolate to both targets, and the visual is pretty daggum cool looking, right? It's also a good bit of damage too, but it's very, very slow. If Backdraft affected it, it would give you a good bit more value in your Havoc window. You can conflict rate, Soulfire, conflict rate, or maybe like launch 2 bolts, conflict rate again. It would give you that extra value while also reapplying or applying Immolate to the target that you're Havocing. It's actually really nice, but I just feel in its current state, without like any kind of CD reduction or cast time reduction, it's sort of in an awkward spot. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. A very simple fix, probably wouldn't change a whole lot, but would make things a little better, a little more competitive in this row when it comes to maybe 2 target fights, Havoc windows being more relevant. 25 row, Entropy, Internal Combustion, Shadowburn. Internal Combustion, as far as I know from last time, is still affected by haste, which is why it was so good with Flashpoint and things like that, and Expedient in Nilotha and things. Just make it scale with Intellect, something like that, and not haste. Now I think the talent's utterly miserable. I hate it, but it probably should be addressed, because at certain points, like at start of an expansion or certain patches at lower haste levels, it's just miserable. It probably needs to be looked at in some way, shape, or form. Shadowburn and Entropy are fine. They've been here for a while. It should be baseline, but you know, it is what it is. Shadowburn's much better this patch than it was previous patch. 35 row being Inferno, Fire and Brimstone, and Cataclysm. Now, if I had one ability being baseline for Destro Lock out of all the choices here, it would be Cataclysm. It's not even close. Cataclysm is like the one spell that if you play Destro without it, the spec literally feels like it's just not complete. But it feels so much better having Kata. Like if I'm in Mythic Plus running into a pack and there's 5 mobs, I'm playing Inferno, Reign of Chaos, like Soul Conduit, the big AoE build, having to go like Immolate, 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 Immolate. Now I can have fun. 7 seconds into the poll feels terrible. It feels like a very just poor design philosophy. Like it just feels sort of gross, you know. Cataclysm is that one ability that you can just go bang. Here's the pack. Kata, 5 Immolates applied. Let's go. Now it is pretty strong when it comes to like burst damage on large adds, like on Painsmith, for example, other fights like that, like Fate Scribe. But the other thing with talents in this row, it is quite literally the only talent that it has any value in single target. Fire and Brimstone and Inferno are pure AoE talents. Cataclysm you actually want to cast in single target because the damage is good, and it also reapplies Immolate. It's basically the same cast time, Immolate being a little shorter, but it has the actual impact damage too, and it has the extra value of, hey, you know, if there's multiple targets, they all get hit by Immolate. Now, I'd love to see it baseline. I don't think it's personally going to happen. What I'm getting at with this row is that I really hope Fire and Brimstone is addressed at some point. It used to be a toggleable ability for locks, and to be fair, it used to actually Fire and Brimstone like AoE cleave Chaos Bolts, which was a little OP. I wouldn't mind it back, but it's probably a little OP. I do think the 40% or 60% damage reduction, because it deals 40% of the damage to targets that it hits, is a bit excessive. To a similar extent, Necrolords with Decimating Bolt, that they also greatly have reduced the damage FMB does when you're a Necrolord and you cast Decimating Bolt. I believe the amp is like for Decimating Bolt like a third of the value you get if you're not playing Fire and Brimstone. I get they're a bit nervous about tuning and probably like the scaling of it with Shard Gen and this AoE damage being insane with Immolate spam. But it's not really anywhere close to having like Cataclysm value in plus. Typically the builds you play are something along like these lines in plus, like this with like Roaring Blaze CDF or a 2-minute build like this, or you play Inferno, Reign of Chaos, Soul Conduit. In no world do you ever consider playing Fire and Brimstone. It's a really cool talent. It's a lot of fun to play with, but it's just drastically undertuned and it's been its way for a while. So I'm hoping that they look at addressing Fire and Brimstone, because that would be a huge bonus quality of life increase. And personally, while I do think Cataclysm should be baseline, it feels great applying all those Immolates in plus. If your Incinerates are generating so many shards and you're on a large AoE pack, technically the Immolate value is not as relevant, and FMB just feels better to play with. It's a change of pace. It needs to be addressed. It needs some attention, I feel. 45 row, Roaring Blades, Reign of Chaos, Sacrifice. Now, let's just come to that row last. Final row here, Dark Soul, CDF, Soul Conduit. We know what they do. They're all fine. It's whatever. Soul Conduit feels out of place, old and gimmicky, but it's fine. Whatever. 45 row. This is the row that needs help. Roaring Blades is fine. It's a good talent, consistent damage. You can havoc it. It's good. It's fine. What you play in rating. Reign of Chaos. This talent, I feel, I talked about it last patch in 9.1 PTR. The RNG that is tied to Reign of Chaos and getting a proc during your first shard consuming spell is excessive. Now, sometimes, like for example, I'll open up here, drop my Infernal. Sometimes, here's my Infernal, on the first shard consuming spell, let's see, you get an Infernal proc. Let's see. We got one. And watch how the value just snowballs. More shards, more Chaos Bolt cast, even more shards. Okay, typically I have another Infernal proc, but even up one Infernal, look at how the value just snowballs. At times you go like proc into like no proc and then proc again. But like, then there are times where you cast your Reign of Chaos like I did right now, and you literally get one proc across 10 spells, and it's the last spell you cast. The RNG on Reign of Chaos, this is a great example. The RNG on Reign of Chaos is just too much. Now, it's played in Mythic Plus for the 2-minute build and the large AoE build, and that's fun. That's fine. Inferno, Soul Conduit, you're spamming so many spells, it doesn't matter. You still get a million Infernals because you're casting 85 Rain of Fires over the course of 2 seconds. But this build is very rarely ever played because it's a very... The build takes a lot of coordination. It's very precise, and it's much better on certain weeks than others. But if you want Reign of Chaos to be more competitive in like rating or more consistent or whatever, my suggestion is to always make the first shard consuming spell give you an Infernal. The first Chaos Bolt, the first Shadow Burn, or the first X, whatever it is, Chaos Bolt, Shadow Burn, Rain of Fire, have it give you an Infernal. Because whether like the second spell and third spell proc it or not, you have that initial Infernal for double shard gen, and then it snowballs and gives you more shard gen for maybe another Infernal proc or another Infernal proc. But not getting a one proc at all until the window basically closes feels miserable. It's like having a dead talent in this row. Now, I know it's very hard to tune. I get that they want to sort of have that Destro chaotic energy, like, you know, randomness here, but here's the thing. When it comes to traits like this, RNG is not really what you want in a progression raid setting. You'll play it like on certain fights if it's just that good. You need the AoE profile, but at times when you're rolling 4 Infernals and you get a 5th one and it despawns your 4th one because you have so much value, and the next pull you have nothing, that's not what you want in a raiding setting. It's not really what you want in a plus setting either. Just, it's awkward. So I think that would go a very, very long way in changing Reign of Chaos. Now, THC also had an idea that you can have it sort of be like Grimoire of Supremacy that increases your actual Infernal damage, like its relation aura value, its actual melee value, based on the number of shard consuming spells you cast while Reign of Chaos is active. Like, so it gives your Infernal a lot more relevancy. Now, that's sort of a throwback to I think Supremacy, right, from last patch, or I guess BFA. Some people liked it, some people hated it, but Supremacy was tied to you and your Chaos Bolt value, which meant, like, you know, more bolts, more stat modifiers. Having your Dark Soul active, having the right procs meant your bolts would hit harder. And that was also in the world of VOP extensions and things, which is really annoying. So that's another way you can take it. It's more of an overhaul. In the end, as long as tuning on it is fine, as long as the RNG clause or some of the RNG and Reign of Chaos is removed, I think it's a step in the right direction. Blizzard made a change to it and tried to address it. I believe in at the end of beta, they made it more consistent, but like, it's just still RNG. And I get they want to have some element of it, Destro chaotic energies, but it just feels too RNG. There are times, I swear there have been times I haven't gotten a single Infernal proc. And there are times it goes Infernal, 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 Infernal. And I can't cast spells fast enough. And that's the kind of RNG that's not very exciting, I feel, to the majority of the player base. Final talent here, Grimoire of Sacrifice. Very similar to what we said for Affliction. Grimoire of Sac also needs to be overhauled. Hunters have Lone Wolf, Frost Mages have Frozen Throne, Lonely Winter, whatever it is. If they have no pet out, they get, I think, like a spell power increase or intellect increase or damage increase, like a flat number. Grimoire of Sacrifice, I believe, was changed coming out of Legion to have this weird damage proc on it. that doesn't scale in multi-target settings and is RNG based. All I really want for sacrifice is to have, like, let's say for example, a flat 10% damage increase, or okay, that might be excessive, a 10% spell power increase or whatever, something that's relevant that scales in like 2-3+ targets. This is applicable for both AF and Destro. Now in this row here, you sort of got your single target, 2-target, and AoE choices, but having sacrifice as that third option wouldn't be bad either. You know, if you don't want the Arena of Chaos RNG, but want a bit more like AoE, I guess, esque like increase, instead of Roaring Blaze being 1 or 2 targets, take sacrifice. Go with it. It's fine. I really wish, like, if I can have one talent changed for any spec, I think it would probably be sacrifice, because it's almost universally acceptable as long as it's good. I don't want them to briefly buff the proc rate or have it proc in AoE. That'd probably be a good step in the right direction, but sacrifice just needs to be reevaluated. Now, sure, there's the Grimoire of whatever from Legion that let you have a Doomguard or Infernal out. That's really cool too. I wouldn't mind sacrifice becoming that either, but you know, either way, sac just needs to be reevaluated because it's been in this odd state for like 2 expansions and just nobody plays it. The only time you play it is if the pet AI is so bad, like in arenas, or your pet gets stunned or killed in arenas, or if your pet is out of range, like on Kalamazi, and it kicks, but it doesn't kick. You play sacrifice instead because your pet isn't working. That's not a good reason to take a talent. Sacrifice needs to be reevaluated big time. Thanks for watching, guys. Now, this video, I believe it's not as long as the Affliction one. I don't think there's as many changes really needed or desired one for Destro as there sort of is AF and probably even Demonology. Destro, this tier felt like the toolkit was on point for the most part because you could play Roaring Blaze or Random Chaos. You have sort of the consistency, and the 2-target reach of Destro actually was pretty good this tier. Now, the single target is a bit lacking, I guess, at times, but that's not necessarily really been Destro's strength. That's sort of where Demo's at, and I think even AF is better than Destro, but single target. Now, if you're playing the full single target build, either way, Destro's baseline toolkit, I think it's in a pretty good spot. It does feel like it could maybe use a tiny bit of a buff damage wise, maybe, but I think a lot of that is more so just me this tier feeling like Destro was gonna be better than it actually ended up being. I think that's just for a lot of reasons. One, bosses being undertuned, not being as relevant on bosses like Painsmith or Remnant because they all got nerfed really early on, and the tier just honestly sort of falling over with domination shards and empowered conduits and everything coming in so early. Regardless, let me know what you guys think of these suggestions, everything in the comment section below. If you guys have any feedback or questions or anything on your own, also be sure to drop them down there. I will be sure to get back to you. I'm also reviewing the comment section on each of these videos for suggestions. And last time when the legendary changes were made for 9.0, they were literally taken word for word from the feedback document we gave, which I think one of those changes was taken from the comment section in this video. So like legitimately, if you have a comment or a suggestion, please drop it down below. I'll read it and I will be sure to get back to you. If you want any weak warriors, profiles, or add-ons you've seen here, you can swing by my Twitch and grab them all. They are indeed all available to you guys for free. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you guys a million times for all the support. I really, truly do indeed appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting, there should be a link somewhere up here, up there, or in the video description down below. With all that being said, if you want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, be sure to smash the like and subscribe buttons below as well. It helps out a ton. Thanks again, dudes, and I'll catch you all again soon on stream. Hopefully in 9.15 PTR in about 12 hours from now. We'll see. Peace.